I came here looking for peace. It wasn't just some random decision, you know. It was practically a scream for freedom after years swallowing the chaos of the big city. No more neighbors slamming doors at 3 a.m. or screaming over a soccer game. I don't even watch. No more power-hungry condo managers hassling me with stupid rules like you can't hang a towel on the balcony or your dog can't bark after 10 p.m. Here it was supposed to be just me, my old pickup truck, the one that's seen more road than I care to admit, the kind of silence that soothes the soul, and a view that makes anyone stop and take a deep breath. The sun setting behind the mountains, the wind whispering through the trees, the smell of wet earth after the rain. It was the perfect dream, the kind you see in movies and think, one day I'll get there. And I did. At least that's what I thought, until I met Karen. No, not just any Karen, not the kind who asks to speak to the manager because her coffee's lukewarm. This was the Karen, the neighbor who thinks she's the queen of the block, the empress. To have this dirt road that doesn't even have a street sign, and get this, the owner of my life. Or at least she thinks she is. At first I brushed it off. I thought, all right, she's just eccentric, every place has its weirdo. But I underestimated the enemy. What I didn't know back then, and would soon learn the hard way, was that this woman was about to turn my peace into a battlefield straight out of a war movie. Every day a new mission. A dirty look, a complaint that made no sense, a subtle hint she swore wasn't a hint. And me, who came here to escape drama, ended up in the eye of the storm. But there was one thing she didn't know. I don't take disrespect lying down. And by the end of it, she'd be the one wishing she'd never crossed my path. I had just gotten back from the store, the sun still high in the sky, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt shimmer on the horizon. I was unloading groceries from my truck, bags full of the basics, coffee, bread, a few beers for later, and a bag of dog food I bought on impulse even though I don't have a dog. The tailgate was down, the radio playing some random song softly, and there I was, sweaty but satisfied, thinking life was finally falling into place. Then she appeared. I don't know where she came from. It was like she sprouted from the ground like a weed you swear you pulled last week. Karen, in the flesh, arms crossed, with that look people get when they're about to fine you for breathing wrong. This road is for authorized residents only, she snapped, pointing at my truck like it was a stolen car parked in front of the White House. Her finger trembled with conviction, and I almost dropped the instant ramen I was balancing on my arm. I looked at her, then at my truck. Yeah, it's a little dented and the paint's peeling, but it's mine, damn it. And replied, trying not to laugh, I live here. This is my driveway, my land. I paid for every square inch of it with my own sweat. It was like I'd spoken another language. She stared me up and down, eyes squinting like I was some city slicker disguised as a country boy, and then dropped this bombshell with a straight face. The neighborhood committee decides who uses what around here. You need written permission. Permission? On my own property. I blinked, stunned, half expecting her to crack a smile and say, just kidding, welcome to the neighborhood. But no, she stood there, rooted like a fence post, waiting for me to pull out a notebook and start jotting down her rules. I thought it was a joke, a bad one, like the kind your drunk uncle tells at Christmas and nobody laughs. But there wasn't a trace of humor on her face. She was dead serious. She genuinely believed some neighborhood committee, which by the way I'd never heard of, had more say over my road than me, the guy who signed the check and carries the keys in his pocket. Right then, as the sun burned the back of my neck and a fly buzzed near the bread bag, I realized this wasn't just some stupid argument. It was the start of a war I never asked for. This road is private, built by the previous owner, I said, pointing at the gravel like the rocks could testify on my behalf. My voice was calm but firm, the kind you use when you want to shut down a conversation with no room for rebuttal. She didn't even blink. Just tapped her finger on the clipboard she was holding, one of those rusty clipped ones stuffed with yellowed papers that looked like they'd been printed back when fax machines were still a thing. Community rules say otherwise, she shot. Back, her tone sharp like she was delivering a verdict in some imaginary courtroom. If you don't comply, there will be consequences. She said consequences with this dramatic weight, like she'd practiced it in front of a mirror. I couldn't help it. I let out a dry laugh, the kind that escapes when you hear something so absurd it's laughable. "Good luck trying to boss." "Turn me around," I tossed back, already turning to head inside, my boots creaking on the wooden porch steps. But then I saw it. As I fished my keys from my pocket and the door groaned open, I glanced over my shoulder one last time. She was still there, planted in the middle of the road, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. The sun hit her face from the side, sharpening the hard lines of her expression, and that look, man, that look wasn't normal. It wasn't just stubbornness or some power trip. It was the look of someone who doesn't back down, the kind of cold determination you see in people who've taken down bigger opponents and are just waiting for the next victim to trip over their own feet. I shut the door behind me, the lock clicking in the quiet of the house, and for a second, I just stood there thinking, did I just poke a hornet's nest? Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and I swear the leaves sounded like they were laughing at me. This wasn't over, and deep down I knew she was already planning her next move. The next morning I stepped out to grab the newspaper like it was any other day, still in my pajamas, hair a mess, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, the kind of peaceful morning I'd moved here for. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and I even whistled some tune as I walked down the porch steps. But the second I reached the driveway, I nearly dropped my coffee. My peripheral vision caught something wrong, and when I looked properly, my jaw hit the ground. The road, my road, was littered with sharp metal spikes glinting in the sun like the teeth of some monster waiting to bite. These weren't just regular nails, the kind you'd find in your grandpa's toolbox. No, these things were serrated, screwed into the ground with sickening precision, like some 80s action movie trap, the kind the villain uses to blow up the hero's car in a chase scene. I blinked 3 times, sure it was a mirage, that my coffee was spiked, or that I was still dreaming. But no, it was real. Karen had trespassed onto my property overnight and planted that minefield. My poor truck was inches away from becoming scrap metal, the front tires nearly kissing those razor-sharp points, like she'd measured it all with a ruler and compass. I crouched down to get a closer look, the coffee in my forgotten mug already, going cold in my hand. This wasn't cheap junk. These weren't just some rusty nails dug up from a backyard toolbox. They were heavy-duty steel plates with edges sharp enough to pop a tractor tire or shred a tank's treads. I knelt there, heart pounding a little faster, and thought, this isn't just petty. This is dangerous and illegal as hell. My blood boiled, but I'm not the type to start screaming like a madman. I took a deep breath, set the mug on the truck's hood, and grabbed my phone. Click after click, I documented every angle of those sadistic traps embedded in my driveway. Then I hit record, narrating like a low-budget detective. April 2nd, my property entrance, illegal metal spikes installed by a psychopath neighbor. I panned the camera to show the road, the gate, even my crooked but still visible private property sign. I needed evidence, lots of it. Because right then, staring at the wrench marks in the gravel and picturing Karen's smug face as she'd set this up, I knew, you picked the wrong guy to mess with, Karen. And I'm not letting this slide. I didn't waste time. Storming out with my phone still hot from all the photos, I marched straight to her house. The walk was short, just 200 meters of dusty road, the sun scorching my neck, my footsteps drumming like war cries. Her house was a white-painted wooden cliché straight out of a home magazine, with floral curtains and a welcome mat that felt like the world's cruelest joke. I hammered the door with my fist, 3 loud knocks that could have woken the dead, if anyone else actually lived out here. She opened the door slowly, and there she was, Karen, with a smile so fake it looked glued on. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice dripping syrup, holding a teacup like some saint hosting afternoon tea. That calm act only made me want to explode. "Are you insane?" I yelled, jabbing a finger at her like a loaded gun. "You planted metal spikes in my driveway. Trying to ruin my life or what?" My voice was raw, my neck burning. She didn't flinch. Just took a slow sip of tea, steam curling like she had all the time in the world, and said, "Rules are rules, you were warned." The way she said it, like I was some naughty kid getting scolded, made my fists clench. "This is illegal, Karen." I shot back, fighting to keep control. "What if an ambulance needs through, or firefighters? You think your little committee can patch a tire or put out a fire? She peered over her teacup, eyes cold as ice, and shrugged. Take it up with the committee if you're unhappy. Like her made-up rulebook was the Supreme Court, and I was some beggar pleading for justice. I nearly lost it. I wanted to snatch that cup and smash it, just to wipe that smirk off her face. But then, mid-rage, something clicked. I forced a smile, crooked but calculated. Don't worry, Karen, I said, dropping my voice to a whisper. I'll take it up with someone, but it won't be your half-baked committee. She tilted her head, still smug, and shut the door without realizing the bomb I'd just armed in my head. I wasn't fighting this war unarmed. I scrolled to Raphael's contact, my lawyer friend since college, the guy who dug me out of worse messes. You won't believe this, I said the second he answered, already sending the photos. His chair squeaked, then laughter exploded through the phone. Metal spikes? On your property? Bro, she's begging to get sued in 3 languages. He caught his breath, then switched to lawyer mode. This is vandalism, trespassing, public endangerment. I could bury her in paperwork. Want me to nuke her? I grinned, tasting revenge. I want her to learn, I said. Make her think twice before pulling this crap again. Done. Send me everything. I'll draft the war declaration. But before unleashing Raphael, I played smarter. If this was war, I needed allies. I headed to old man João's place, the neighborhood's living archive, rocking on his porch with a Guaraná soda and a crackling football game on the radio. So, João, you know Karen? I asked, leaning on the railing. He rolled his eyes so hard I thought they'd stick. Oh, I know her. Harasses everyone with that committee nonsense. Fined my grandson for leaving a skateboard in the garage, called it a safety hazard. I showed him the spike photos. His glasses slid down his nose as he gaped. What? That woman's unhinged. This isn't just annoying, it's criminal. He leaned in, dead serious. You need backup, I'm in. Plenty of us are sick of her. As the sun dipped and the radio cheered a goal, I felt the tide turning, and Karen had no idea about the army I was building against her. The next day, Raphael didn't waste any time. He sent Karen an official letter on fancy letterhead, complete, with lawyer stamps and enough legal jargon to make anyone nervous, even me, and I don't know the first thing about law. He called me right after, laughing. That should scare her straight. If those spikes aren't gone within 48 hours, she'll be explaining herself to a judge. I could just picture it. Karen opening that envelope, her forehead wrinkling as she tried to play it cool. I grabbed a beer and settled on my porch to enjoy the show. And sure enough, hours later, there she was, kneeling in my driveway with a shovel, angrily yanking up those metal plates. Her face was bright red, whether from anger, embarrassment, or just the physical effort, I couldn't tell. Her hair was a mess, falling into her face as she muttered to herself, words I couldn't quite hear but knew were about me. I leaned against the railing, slowly sipping my beer, thinking, all right, it's over. Easy victory. The sunset painted the E. Sky orange, and for a moment I really thought peace had returned to my life, but I'd underestimated just how stubborn that woman could be, and worse, her ability to turn defeat into ammunition for the next battle. That night, I was just about to fall asleep when I heard a strange noise outside, a muffled sound like metal hitting stone, followed by a hiss I couldn't identify. I jumped out of bed, my heart already racing instinctively, and grabbed the powerful flashlight I keep on my nightstand, the kind that could light up the whole neighborhood. I went out onto the porch barefoot, the cold wood under my feet, and pointed the beam toward the driveway. What I saw nearly knocked me over. The metal plates were back, planted in exactly the same spots as before, but with one crucial difference. Each one was now surrounded by fresh cement, still wet and glistening under the flashlight beam, like it had just been poured minutes earlier. This wasn't just a replacement. It was reinforcement, a blatant challenge. Karen must have sneaked back under cover of darkness, probably with a wheelbarrow and a bag of cement stolen from some construction site, turning those traps into a monument to her own madness. I stood there frozen, the night wind chilling the back of my neck, the flashlight shaking in my hand as I realized this was beyond obsession. This was a declaration of war. She wasn't going to back down because of some lawyer's letter, and I was going to need much more than photos, and Raphael's help to tear down this fortress of stubbornness she was building. I wasn't about to let this slide. With the flashlight still illuminating the newly cemented metal plates, I grabbed my phone and started documenting everything all over again. I took photos from every angle, the fresh cement shining like a provocation, the jagged edges of the plates reflecting the light like the teeth of a rabid animal. Then I recorded a video, my voice hoarse with sleep and anger. Check this out, midnight, and the crazy lady came back with cement to reinforce her traps in my driveway. I panned the phone to show the entire road, my house's gate, even the dark starry sky that seemed to bear silent witness to this insanity. As soon as I finished, I called Raphael without even checking the time. He answered groggily, clearly pulled from sleep. "She doubled down," I said, cutting straight to the chase. I heard him groan on the other end, a sound mixing irritation and disbelief. "Seriously, she's digging her own grave here. This is double the vandalism. Violation of the notice. This'll be in court in no time." I smiled, tasting revenge forming in my mouth. "Then go for the kill," I said firmly. "I want to see her explain this to a judge." He laughed, more awake now. "Leave it to me. By tomorrow, this paperwork will be domicile." But as I hung up and went back inside, I noticed something odd in the dim light. One corner of my rusty old mailbox, the metal one nailed to the post, was bent, like someone had tampered with it. I moved the flashlight closer and saw a folded note tucked between the cracks. I carefully pulled out the paper, unfolding it, like it might explode in my hands. The handwriting was neat, almost childish, written in black pen. "Follow the rules or you'll regret it." No signature, nothing. But I didn't need a name to know who wrote it. Her audacity sent a chill through me for a second, but then the anger came rushing back. I stuffed the note in my pocket, already imagining Raphael rubbing his hands together with this new evidence for the case. This woman was hanging herself with her own rope, and I was going to make sure that noose was good and tight. The next day, I decided to strengthen my forces. If the whole neighborhood was suffering under Karen's rule, I could turn this into a collective uprising. I went to Donna Clara's house, a petite elderly woman who lives on the corner, always wearing a flowered apron with an easy smile, except when it came to the neighborhood hellion. I knocked on her door, and she greeted me with a plate of bolinhos, de chuva, Brazilian donut holes, the smell of cinnamon filling the porch. "Karen tried to fine me for planting sunflowers in my yard," she said, before I could even ask, her eyes flashing with indignation as she set the plate on the table. "Said they violated the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. Sunflowers, for God's sake. Who doesn't like sunflowers?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos of the cemented plates, then the threatening note. Donna Clara clutched her chest, her expression shifting from anger to shock. "This is pure madness. Does she think she owns the world? Count me in to put a stop to this woman." She crossed her arms, determined, and I could practically hear another piece clicking into place in my plan. The neighborhood was starting to turn against Karen, a quiet revolution growing house by house, and she, blinded by her stubbornness, didn't even see the tsunami coming her way. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when I heard an engine rumbling down the road. It was Raphael, stepping out of a black car with Sergeant Mendez beside him, a hulking policeman with a grizzled mustache and the look of someone who's seen it all in this neighborhood. Raphael carried a folder in his hand, smiling like a man holding all the cards, while Mendez adjusted his duty belt, clearly in no mood for nonsense. I hurried out of the house, still holding my coffee mug, and saw Karen standing in my driveway, like she owned the place. She had her arms crossed, chin raised, glaring at my pickup truck like its very existence offended her personally. I walked over, gravel crunching under my boots, and planted my feet firmly. "This is private property," I said, pointing to the land I'd fought so hard to call my own. "You don't make the rules here, Karen." She gave me a crooked smile, the kind that makes you want to throw a punch, and shot back, "The committee voted. Strangers aren't allowed on this road." Her tone was pure venom, as if some scribbled rules on a clipboard carried more weight than actual laws. That's when Sergeant Mendez stepped forward, his deep voice cutting through the air like thunder. "Ma'am, these signs are illegal. Public." Hazard, trespassing, vandalism. Pick the crime you'd rather answer for. Take them down now or I'll take you to the station. Raphael stood beside him, shaking his head with a half-smile as if to say, I told you so. Karen's face changed instantly. A deep red crawled up her neck to her cheeks, her eyes blinking fast, and that air of superiority crumbled like a sandcastle in the rain. She opened her mouth to argue, but Mendez's gaze, firm, leaving no room for negotiation, made her swallow the words. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the scene got even better. Neighbors started to appear, Donna Clara peeking through her curtain, São João's grandson recording everything on his phone, even a woman I didn't recognize standing at the corner with a cup in her hand, watching like she had front-row seats. Karen grabbed a shovel leaning against the fence, the handle creaking under her grip, and started digging into the fresh cement, prying out the signs. Sweat dripped down her red face, her hair sticking to her forehead as she tossed each metal plate onto the ground with a loud clang like a funeral bell echoing in the air. It was humiliation in real time. From São João's porch came the final blow. It's about time someone put this woman in her place. There he was, in his slippers and an old t-shirt, shaking his fist like a judge delivering a sentence. Raphael chuckled beside me. Sergeant Mendez kept a close watch to make sure she didn't try anything sneaky. And me? I stood on my porch, arms crossed, my coffee mug still warm in my hands, enjoying the show. The sun cast a spotlight on the scene, and for a moment I tasted the sweet flavor of victory. The neighborhood united, Karen defeated, the signs turned to scrap. But as she threw down the last sign and wiped the sweat off her forehead in frustration, I caught a glint in her eyes. A stubborn, dangerous glint. That wasn't surrender, it was just a pause. Deep down I knew Karen wasn't going to give up that easily. She was humiliated, sure, but people like her don't swallow defeat. They turn it into poison for the next round. That night, the usual silence of the street was broken by strange noises. First, a rustling sound like someone stumbling over Donna Marta's trash cans. Then, muffled voices, tense with urgency. Curious, I got up from my chair, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet in the empty house, and went to the window. Outside, under the yellow glow of the streetlights, I saw Karen darting from house to house. Her disheveled blonde hair bounced as she clutched a clipboard like a battle shield. She banged on Seu Alfredo's door so hard that his dog started barking non-stop. "Sign here, it's for everyone's good," I heard her say, her voice sharp as a knife. She was collecting signatures, of course, always coming up with some wild scheme to save the neighborhood. The next morning, the sun had barely risen when my intercom buzzed. It was a warning. Karen had called for an emergency residence committee meeting. Tonight at 7 in Donna Lourdes Hall. Attendance is mandatory. The note was taped to the entrance, written in her neat yet commanding handwriting. I couldn't resist. I grabbed a jacket, poured myself a coffee to go, and headed over. More for the spectacle than out of civic duty. When I arrived, the hall was already packed. The smell of reheated coffee and cornbread cake hung in the air, mixed with the murmur of hushed conversations. Karen climbed onto the makeshift stage, a rickety table that groaned under her steps. "This intruder is destroying our community," she yelled, pointing a finger at no one in particular, her eyes blazing with indignation. "He doesn't respect the rules. He parks in other people's spots, throws trash in the garden, ignores quiet hours." The clipboard shook in her hands, like it was about to explode from all the pent-up rage inside her. But the neighbors, they couldn't take the drama anymore. The mood shifted quickly. Mrs. Clara, a tiny lady with white hair and crooked glasses, got up from her chair with an energy no one expected. "You're the problem, Karen," she blurted out, her firm voice cutting through the air like thunder. The hall fell silent for a second. Only the hum of the fan could be heard in the corner. "Enough of you bossing us around like you're the queen. We want to live in peace, not in war." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mr. João, who spent his days fixing bicycles in his garage, raised his calloused hand and added, "Kick her out of the committee. Enough is enough." People started clapping, some even laughed, and chaos took over. Karen turned red, lips pressed into a thin line, trying to argue, but no one was listening anymore. Mr. Roberto, who always carried a little notebook to jot things down, proposed an immediate vote. Who's in favor of removing Karen from her position? Raise your hand. A sea of arms shot up. Even little Lucas, 7 years old and only there for the cake, raised both hands, laughing. Against? Silence. Not even Mrs. Lurds, Karen's friend since school days, moved. The verdict fell like a hammer. Karen was out. No power, no clipboard, no audience. She stepped down from the stage slowly, her heels echoing against the wooden floor, and walked out without looking back. I stood there watching the dust settle. People started chatting about the weather, the weekend game, as if nothing had happened. I sipped the last of my now cold coffee and thought, finally peace, at least until someone else has a brilliant idea. The next day, I went out to get my pickup truck and nothing. The driveway was empty. I rushed to check the security. Cameras, Karen at 2 a.m., smiling as a tow truck hauled my car away. My blood boiled. She'd gone too far. I grabbed my phone and called Sergeant Mendez. My truck was stolen, and I know who did it. 20 minutes later, he was at my door. I showed him the footage. "This is theft," he said, shaking his head. "We'll get your truck back. And her." We headed straight to the impound lot. There was my truck, locked up. The owner tried to charge a fee, but the sergeant shut it down. "Release it now, or you'll be answering for this too." I got my truck back and thought, time to end this. We left the lot and drove straight to Karen's house, the patrol, car's engine growling while I followed behind, still feeling the adrenaline rush. We reached her street in minutes. Sergeant Mendez knocked on the door with that firm touch that means business. Karen opened it, her blonde hair tied in a messy ponytail, and flashed a cynical smile, as if she still had control of the situation. "What now?" she sneered. But when she saw the sergeant in uniform and my stone-cold face behind him, the color drained from her face like paint in the rain. "You're under arrest for vehicle theft," the sergeant announced, pulling out the handcuffs with a sharp metallic click. The sound echoed in the quiet porch. Karen's eyes widened and she took a step back, almost tripping over the doormat. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, her voice turning hysterical. "I did it for the good of the neighborhood. That truck was against the rules." The sergeant didn't even blink, just snapped the cuffs around her wrists as she flailed, trying to argue with frantic gestures. I pulled my phone out and held it up in front of her, the video playing on the screen. "Theft is a crime, Karen." "It's all here, you, the tow truck, the smile, it's over." She fell silent for a moment, eyes locked on the image of herself, but then started struggling again as the sergeant led her to the patrol car. "You'll regret this," she screamed, but no one cared. Karen took a fall that shook the neighborhood. After the circus in front of her house, the judge showed no mercy. Thousands in fines, a theft charge that would haunt her for years, and, to top it all off, her permanent expulsion from the neighborhood committee. The entire community breathed a sigh of relief, as if a weight had been lifted. Conversations at the bakery went back to being about the weather and the price of bread, not about her crazy rules. And me? I got my peace back, my driveway free, to park my truck wherever I pleased, and a story that's been a hit at every barbecue since. Moral of the story: don't mess with someone who just wants to live in peace, because payback comes, and when it does, it's well deserved. In the end, the last laugh and the loudest was mine. And you? What would you do if you had to deal with a Karen like this? Have you ever had a neighbor that drove you crazy? Like the ones who mow their lawn at 6 in the morning or complain about your dog just breathing? Share your war stories in the comments. If you enjoyed this saga, smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and hit the bell, because, who knows, the next story might just be about Karen's comeback with an even crazier plan. See you next time, folks.